The following is a presentation of 13ABC Action News. Now, your table is ready. Join 13ABC's Jeff Smith with the decision makers of Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan. This is the Roundtable.
And hi there, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us here on this Sunday, noon hour. The Roundtable is the program. I'm Jeff Smith. In our second segment today, we're going to blow you away with some numbers as far as the Lucas County Summer Food Program is concerned. You will be amazed to see the number of meals that have been served year to year, and that need is growing, unfortunately. We'll have the details of that coming up in our second segment. But as we start out here today, right out of the gate, we want to talk about the economy and where things stand. A lot of reports have been pointing toward us getting in. We are in August, and already we're talking about finishing out this year, going into another recession. Could it be the possibility? We have invited a number of guests here with us this afternoon to join us at the table. Lucas County Treasurer Wade Kapsakavich, glad to see you here. Thanks for making the stop at the Roundtable.
Glad to be here.
Also, David Seeger, he is an instructor of business over at Lourdes University, also the president of Great Lakes Credit Union. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And from Kirsten Wealth Management, Kevin Kirsten. You also may hear him some mornings, Saturday mornings between 7 and 8 on WSPD for Money Sense. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, good to be here.
We're going to start off. Wade, as you look, you have worked with campaigns in the past, and as you see things flushing out, obviously we're in a big election year, but a lot of signs pointing toward the economy not being where it needs to be. Is that your read?
Well, the economy is certainly not where we'd want it to be, but I don't believe it is I don't believe it is quite as bad as maybe the doomsayers would have us believe. You know, the old saying is that when your neighbor doesn't have a job, that's a recession. When you don't have a job, that's a depression. Mm-hmm. I think that we are in this country creating jobs every month. Not a lot, not nearly as many as we'd want. But, you know, 4 years ago, we were losing hundreds of thousands of jobs every month. So, and then you look at the dynamic here in a place like Ohio, the unemployment rate is about a full percentage below where it is nationally. So there are sectors and pockets that are doing better than others, but I don't think anyone is happy with where the economy is.
Do you think another recession is on tap?
I don't think so. I look at my office as the county treasurer. Our tax collections are up this year. They're higher this year than they were last year. They were higher last year than they were the year before. I think we bottomed out about a year, maybe a year and a half ago. And though people are struggling and tightening their belts, and though we're not nearly where we want to be, I think there are signs that things are incrementally getting better. I mean, personal incomes increased this month for the first time since, I think, February. People have slightly more disposable income this month than they did back in February. Here locally, yeah. The Jeep plant is cranking out, 30% more volume than they were this time last year.
Kevin,
it's not great, but it's better.
Kevin, a lot of reports coming out that even though that income may be increasing, people are hesitating on getting out there and spending it.
Well, not so much individuals. It's businesses. It's businesses that are hesitant. A lot of CEOs were burnt in 2008, and that's fresh in their minds right now. And if you look at earnings reports that come out and you see the CEOs come on TV and they talk about it, they're very hesitant. The risk management operations of all companies are as high as they've ever been. I just read an article yesterday about UPS. They saw the first time they saw a sign of any slowdown in June, they pulled back immediately. Whereas 4 years ago, they would have waited for a couple more months of readings before they pulled back any of their operations. And so when you see these earnings reports and you see company after company saying, well, we have this much cash on the sidelines, I think that's a positive. I think that provides a buffer, because they do have that cash. They have paid down debt over the last several years. So the average S&P 500 company is sitting with a very good balance sheet right now. They're just not willing to spend the money.
We have done the reports here talking about the false front that exists with the stock market at 13,000. Is that something? I mean, there's that mental capacity that people think, oh, well, everything's doing better. But that's kind of a false front, isn't it?
Well, there's a big difference between the economy and the stock market. The stock market, I believe, is more forward-looking than the economy is. And also, keep in mind, expectations are very, very low for the stock market right now. You can see that when you see numbers come out. You can see jobs number come out, and you say, wow, that number wasn't really very good. Yet the market went up on that day, because it's all about expectations. 12 years, we're the same place we were on the S&P 500 and the Dow as we were in the year 2000. So expectations are pretty low when you go 12 years and the market goes nowhere.
David, I asked Wade, I said, is there another recession on tap? What do you think?
I think very well there could be, in as much as starting January 1st, there's something that the media is calling Tax-Mageddon. And that's when the Bush tax cuts expire, as well as mandatory cuts in spending in both defense and non-defense areas of the budget. We're talking about $100 billion, for example. We're looking, a little bit more than that, in terms
Some
of.
economists have called it a fiscal cliff that
Yeah,
we could be approaching.
The chairman of the Federal Reserve is referred to as a fiscal cliff, or commonly it's called Tax-Mageddon, to the extent we have both these factors coming to play. You have the increase in taxes as well as the decrease in spending, which is going to slow the economy down as much as potentially 4 points to the GDP. Right now, the GDP is right about 1.5% to the positive. That will take it negative. And by definition, a recession is defined as 2 quarters of negative growth. We could find that very easily after the first of the year if Congress and the President does not intercede to try to make some changes to soften some of the tax increases and reduction in spending for the budget for next year.
We've never had in the last 50 years a cut of more than 2% that didn't result in a recession. So if they are going to go in there, going to make the adjustments to the tax cuts and the automatic spending cuts, when you have a 1.5%, 2% GDP, if they're going to do it, and it certainly is a problem we need to tackle, right now it needs to be more like 0.5% or maybe 1% at most until we get this economy growing again. The one thing that you can look to on the United States versus Europe, Europe is 6 or 7 years ahead of us. And the problem that they face is they knew about this 6 or 7 years ago. They knew that they were going to have their fiscal cliff, and they didn't do anything about it.
But what does it mean seeing 6 out of 17 of the countries that use the euro compared to the dollar are in a recession right now? What does that mean for us? What does that mean for our viewers at home?
Well, the one good thing is, in terms of exports, it's the smallest part of the world that we export to in the United States. We export much more to the emerging markets, to China. And one of the reasons why you've seen a little bit of a slowdown in China, and now a slowdown in China, they're at 7% gross domestic product growth. So it's relative because they were up over 10% at one point in time. However, much of their slowdown is as a result of the fact that they have major exports to Europe. So we do have a little bit of a buffer here because our major exports go to the emerging markets, go to China, go to those areas of the world, not so much to Europe. Over the last 5 years, global GDP has grown by 3% per year, and European GDP hasn't grown at all. So I do believe that they've become a smaller part of the pie, but there are certain things that do have to be put in place in the years to come in order for them to get their house in order. And I think more importantly, what lessons can we learn here in the United States so that we don't become like them? And I think the main lesson is the fact that you cannot continue to kick the can down the road on cutting the budget, making spending cuts and things like that. You cannot continue to push it down the road because if you're like Europe and you get to the final year where you have to do it, you have to make all the cuts at once, and it causes a big recession.
Wade, we talked about that fiscal cliff. Is it a double-edged sword in your view because we are in an election year where governments have to sit on their hands waiting to see what happens?
Well, nothing, I can assure you that nothing productive ever happens in an election year when it comes to politicians having to do the often unpleasant work of governing. Nobody.
That's unsettling.
Well, it is unsettling, but you see the rhetoric being ramped up. Yeah. You see both parties digging lines in the sand. You know, the one side says we got to cut here. The other side says, okay, if you do that, then we need to increase taxes there. Nobody wants to increase taxes during an election year. But even beyond that, we have entered a era in politics that is so acrimonious and so divisive. And both parties, but I think in the last 2 or 3 years here with the rise of the Tea Party movement, it's affected the Republican side a little more. There aren't any compromisers left in Congress, in the House or Senate. There aren't any centrists. The centrists of both parties have been sort of purged by the more ideologically radical on both sides. So what you have, unfortunately, is this partisanship and this gridlock, do-nothing environment coming out of Washington is only likely to get worse. And that is very unsettling.
It's not the first time we've seen something like this. I mean, it may, in your view, have gotten worse.
It's not the first time we've seen something like this, but I don't I can't believe that any time in the last 100 years we have seen such partisanship and such division and inability to agree what's up and what's down. That's just going to make it difficult going forward.
Well, until they fix that political apparatus of, we got to get back to compromise and meeting halfway, we're not going to fix the big problem. And that is the biggest obstacle now for us in terms of us going ahead and moving forward with fiscal responsibility and fiscal prosperity.
But the great compromisers in Congress, in the Senate, have all been defeated in the last election cycle, not in their general election, but in their own primaries by members of their own party who feel as though they're not, conservative enough or liberal enough. So Dick Lugar, for instance, in neighboring Indiana, longtime Republican senator, centrist, compromiser, one of those people who get in there and get things done. He just lost this past spring in the Republican primary to someone who felt that he wasn't conservative enough. So out goes another compromiser, in comes another flag-waving radical, and both parties are guilty of it. We have a political environment now where it is almost impossible to get anything done, and that is worrisome, I think, as we head toward what is happening in Europe.
When we're looking at Europe, though, our government has to get smaller. It just has to get smaller, and the reason is because the European governments got to the point and got to the size where they were such a large percentage of the economic pie that when you get to the point where you have to cut budgets, you have to come in with fiscal responsibility, you can't do it all at once because it sends the country into a recession. We need to get our government into a more reasonable size so that we can make those cuts. The problem you get yourself into is you get to the end game like Europe is right now, and you say now we have to make those cuts, and you lose 10, 20% of your economy because your entire economy is government. So we are in the fortunate position that we do have 5, maybe 10 years to work things out. But if we kick the can down the road till the 9th year on Social Security and Medicare and getting our house in order, then all the cuts will happen all at once, and then we're in real trouble at that point.
Does it matter in your estimation? I mean, are our hands tied fiscally no matter who gets into office in under 100 days now?
In my opinion, yes. I mean, no matter who gets in, they're going to be faced with the same type of problem trying to get things through Congress to make things better and correct the issues that are facing us. And it's a mess, no matter how you look at it.
They will make it retroactive when whatever they decide to do. Certainly, as it stands, no matter who gets in office, I do not think that I think it's $536 billion is the hit to GDP. They will make it retroactive, but what does that do to confidence? What does it do to confidence when you wait till the final hour like they did last year on the Bush tax cuts? What does that do to consumer confidence? That's really the factor that hasn't been considered yet.
Wait, does it matter? I mean, with where we see things going right now.
Regardless of who is elected this November, that person isn't going to be a king or a benevolent dictator. That person's still going to have to work with a Congress, and a Congress that, as I said a moment ago, is much more partisan than it ever was, with fewer people who even believe in compromise, in fact, see compromise as the problem. That's going to make it very difficult for whether it's Obama or Romney, as we move forward.
Here in Lucas County, you guys have looked at regionalizing your government, and not only regionalizing, but kind of creating a council for county as well as what we see in the city. I mean, is that the mold that we need to see our government take?
Well, I do think that we always should be looking for opportunities for efficiencies and tightening our belts, doing more with less. I do think we should be moving more toward a regional approach on a number of these solutions. The idea I think you're alluding to is this county charter idea. One of the reasons I think that idea hasn't gone anywhere, and a couple of weeks ago they failed to get the right number of petitions, I just don't think there's a lot of enthusiasm for it, is that, at least on the county side, Lucas County, though not perfect, has done a decent job downsizing responsibly without a tremendous loss in services. We've maintained our bond rating. I think we've done it the right way, and I think that's one of the reasons that there never was momentum for that county charter idea. However, I think we are going to continue to struggle in Lucas County when we continue to have all of these overlapping jurisdictions that compete for resources, I think, inefficiently. In Lucas County, you have 22 different cities, villages, and townships, which means 22 different mayors, 22 different police chiefs, 22 fire chiefs, importantly, 22 different economic development directors throwing tax money at Walmart, so it locates on the north side of Holland-Sylvania Road, not the south side, because that's in a different jurisdiction. That is wasteful. And until we come up with a solution to do something about that, then I think we're going to continue to be spinning our wheels.
I want to show people real quick the graphic at home. If we haven't shown it already, just go over to some of the things looking at the possibility of another recession, weaker hiring, nervous consumers, sluggish manufacturing, overhang of Europe's debt crisis. We've talked about all of these things. As we get later in the fall and into the winter season and potentially a blue Christmas, another blue Christmas, David, point the finger. What's going to fix it? Who's going to fix this?
Well, that's the $64 question. What we're going to need to do.
It's even more than that.
It is. It's probably like 15 trillion. You're talking about the total debt. Yes, exactly. Well, what needs to be done is one, we need to look realistically, where do we want to be as a nation in terms of our fiscal responsibility? How much government do we want to have? What are we going to do about entitlements? 46 cents of every dollar we spend right now goes to entitlements. In 20 years or 25 years, we're looking at 61 cents. There's not going to be room for anything else that's going to be left for us to spend for discretionary spending, because we got it tied up in entitlements. We need to look realistically where we are with entitlements. We need to pare them back to what we can afford, and that's going to be one of the hinges of our economic recovery over the long term. We have promises we made to our seniors and our soon-to-be seniors, and we don't know where we're going to get that money from in order to pay them.
Got about a minute. Kevin, point the finger. Where's it go?
I agree with what Wade is saying with gridlock, and I think the main thing that we have to have coming up is, I think it would be beneficial to actually, especially in Congress, to have a one-party rule. I think it would be beneficial, and historically the market have responded to that. Especially in Congress, one-party rule. Markets have done very well when there's one-party rule.
No matter who it is.
No matter who it is. And when you're looking at, especially in the Senate, the House is certainly going to stay with the Republicans, but when you're looking at the Senate, and 2/3 of the Senate seats that are up are Democrats, and I think people are looking for change. So I don't think that looks good, and so I would think that if we can get to a point where we can keep the majority of the tax cuts and the automatic spending cuts, we do need spending cuts, but they can't be as big as they are, then that would be a positive.
Last word.
We need spending cuts, but the middle class can't continue to be paying the entire way. We have to get to a situation of more fairness, and I think that means those millionaires out there need to finally start
You were opening a whole new can of worms now.
And I'm all for
Can we continue the show there?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm all for one-party rule as long as it's the right party.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll leave it on that note, and discussion continues in the green room if we had one. Stay right there. We will continue in our second segment right after this.